If you or someone you know are a struggling Major League ball club and are in need of righting the ship, come to Great American Ballpark and play a few games with the Cincinnati Reds. Why the Los Angeles Dodgers completely dominated the Reds this year, and how the Reds and Dodgers can work out yet another trade between the two teams is all ahead on today's crossover edition of the podcast.
You are Locked On Reg and Locked On Dodgers. Thanks for making Locked On Reds and Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day. We are all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and we are free and available on all platforms. I am your co-host of Locked On Reds, Stephen Offenbaker, alongside co-host Jeff Carr of Locked On Reds and co-host Jeff Snider from the Locked On Dodgers podcast. We all have a passion for baseball. We all have a passion for our teams, and we have all turned that passion into information for you. On today's crossover edition of the podcast, we will answer a few questions like just how many MVPs would Freddie Freeman win if he only had to face Reds pitching? Will the Dodgers win the National League again? And what can the Dodgers offer the Reds for Luis Castillo or Tyler Mahle? Today's crossover episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. Locked On Reds and Locked On Dodgers listeners can get $50 off purchases of $500 or more using the promo code Locked On at checkout at BlueNile.com. All right, Jeffs, both of you, the Dodgers absolutely smashed the Reds 7 times in 2022. Jeff Carr, how does that make you feel?
Bad. I need a Coke. It's that bad.
That's a Diet Coke, isn't it?
Well, I'm trying to watch the, sugar intake. No, I'm just that was a rough series to watch. I was at the ballpark for game 2, and just every single time it seemed like the Reds scored a run, it was like, great, well, we won't get shut out, because there was just so much of an overmatched feeling to all of it. And they even said there was a couple of different reports, whether you're talking about some beat writers who got to talk to guys after the game, or there was even Sam Green, awesome photojournalist for the Enquirer, who said that he was in the dugout. He's been in pretty much every team's dugout at different points during the season, and he said that there's a common thread amongst successful teams. They're loud, they're excited, they're happy for their teammates, and he's never felt that when he's been in the Reds dugout, and especially this year. And moreover, 52-18 in 7 games. 52 to Jeff, what on earth, man?
Yeah, the first 4-game series, you thought, we held the Dodgers to only 24 runs in 4 games. That's pretty good. But then, 26 runs in 3 games this time. Yeah, I accidentally smiled the whole time you were sad in your intro. I hope that's okay. I hope that doesn't ruin the video. But, this is what the Dodgers needed. And the fact is, I don't really know, because the 3 guys who pitched for the Reds are pretty good. We're going to talk later in this episode about how the Dodgers might be able to get 1 or 2 of them from you guys. You got very highly touted prospect and 2 really good pitchers, and the Dodgers just put a beating on all of them. And obviously the Reds bullpen getting involved doesn't help any cause for the Reds ever. But it's what the Dodgers needed. And I don't know how much of it was facing Reds pitching, how much of it was hitting at Great American Ballpark, but it's not like, even the home runs they hit today, it's not like they were wall scrapers or anything. They were, legitimate home runs. And so, I think it was just kind of the Dodgers offense kind of came together, but whatever it was, it's what they needed to right the ship a little bit, because Dodgers offense have been struggling a little bit coming into the series.
I tell you, and we got a surprise here, because this is another great way to put it as well.
Waylon Jennings song about whistlers and jugglers and singers of songs. Today's Dodgers-Reds game was about the whiffers and strugglers who became bringers of dongs. What's up? It's Jeff from Locked On Dodgers. Any chance to bring in a Shel Silverstein lyric, I will do it. The Dodgers beat the Reds 10-5 behind unexpected big days from Max Muncy, Justin Turner, and Cody Bellinger. Muncy and Bellinger both homered. Turner had 2 doubles, and the usual suspects too. Trea Turner had 3 more hits. Freddie Freeman had 2 hits and a homer. Will Smith had another homer. All around, great team effort. Dodgers had 16 hits and 4 walks, a ton of traffic on the bases, and scored at least 1 run in each of the final 8 innings of this game. good, solid performance by Clayton Kershaw. Solid performance, 1 run in 6 innings. It's kind of what we expect from the starting pitching these days. The only thing that kept this from being a perfect baseball game was Phil Bickford had a hiccup, allowed 4 runs in 2/3 of an inning, including a 3-run homer to the worst person in the world, Tommy Pham. Other than that, though, great game all around. Yency Almonte was great for an inning, a third. David Price had a solid 9th inning, and the offense showed up, putting up a total of, 26 runs in 3 games? Yeah, we'll take it. So be sure to check out Locked On Dodgers first thing in the morning for all the talk about this one, and looking forward to the Braves series. Make us your first listen. Man, I feel like I need a cigarette. I don't even smoke.
All right, couple things. First of all, I love anytime anybody can incorporate a Shel Silverstein lyric or writing.
I see you, Johnny Cash shirt. You got some love for.
That's
Shel
an
Silverstein.
autographed copy of Where the Sidewalk Ends, right there behind me
Nice.
on the shelf. Love Shel. So good job. Yes, Boy Named Sue, Johnny Cash. Love that. Secondly, worst person in the world, Tommy Pham. I don't know that an organization that is writing paychecks to Trevor Bauer gets to call anybody the worst person in the world. But
Hey, they're not
I will
paying
say
him.
this.
They're not paying him.
Well, they did.
Bud Stern,
And,
Oh,
and
so did the Reds.
yes, we did.
Jeff Carr, you stay on my side. But no, I would tell you that thirdly, last piece of this is that might be one of the best Locked On Nows
Of the day,
of
for
the
sure.
year. That was a home run. Good job on that.
Well, thank you.
Dude, I've watched it 3 times since you did it. I've been laughing the whole time because you're right. I mean, it was absolutely, it just encapsulates this entire series. The Reds absolutely got outclassed in every single way. And I've wanted to be a little bit more competitive with some of these post-game or post-series crossovers, but haven't really been able to this year. And this one for sure was just like, well, the Dodgers are feeling good heading into Atlanta.
Yeah. You go into any series, your goal is to win the series. But when you are the Dodgers going in a series with the Reds, the actual goal that you don't say out loud is we should really sweep this series. And this should be the series where we get on track offensively. We sweep this series. We get some momentum going up against the Braves. Everything that you don't say out loud, but you hope for deep in your heart is what happened the last 3 games.
Well, and it might not be to the Dodgers, but I'll say this from the Reds side of things: trade Tommy Pham now. 3 hits, homer, 2 outfield assists in 1 game. Like, I mean, come on, trade him right now. Maybe,
and then you guys wouldn't have to root for him anymore.
and then we wouldn't have to root for him anymore. I tell you what, if there was ever a doubt as to where the Reds should be, and there really shouldn't have been at all, it's firmly within the sellers column, Steve. We look at which Dodgers prospects might be available as we talk with Jeff here, which ones aren't, and we build a mock trade between the Reds and Dodgers. By the way, if you want to build the perfect engagement ring, head to BlueNile.com. Jeff, you're a jewelry expert, right? You know exactly what you're looking for whenever you're talking about the shiny stuff.
Yes, for sure.
I know I'm not. I'll tell you this. I know that I have no clue.
You can't even say jewelers.
Yeah, I'm trying my best to say shiny things rather than jewelry. No, but when it comes to finding the right piece, whether you're trying to celebrate a special moment or if you want an engagement ring that's going to be a showstopper, check out BlueNile.com. You can put together a very unique ring that you can choose the shape of the diamond, the size of the diamond, the setting of the diamond, and they've got a lot of great experts at BlueNile.com who are going to help you out. Some may call them jewelers, but when you take a look at the kind of inventory that Blue Nile has, you'll be blown away. Plus, you can get a great offer today. Locked On Reds and Locked On Dodgers listeners get $50 off a $500 order by using the promo code Locked On at checkout. That's promo code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in the kind of packaging that's not going to give away the gift that you just got somebody. Because let's face it, everybody's looking for an Amazon package nowadays, and Blue Nile is going to make it so that nobody's going to know what's going on. So go to BlueNile.com today, and in the checkout section, in the How'd You Hear About Us area, type in, or in the promo code area, type in Locked On. I was getting ads mixed up. Steve is not surprised. Meanwhile, if we look at the Dodgers and the Reds odds to win the NL pennant, I think everybody's pretty not surprised to learn that they're very, very different. There's a huge gulf between it. In fact, Jeff, the Reds are the worst, and the Dodgers have the shortest odds. They are the favorites to win the NL pennant at plus 225. You throwing a couple of bones on there?
I'm not a gambling man, but this doesn't seem like much of a gamble, so I might as well.
It's going to be a dogfight, I think, between them and the Mets. But the Dodgers are so freaking stacked. And then on the flip side, if you want to bet on a major league style ending to the movie, Steve, did you know that if you put $1 on the Reds right now, and the Reds were to somehow win the NL pennant, you'd win $500 because the odds are plus 50,000?
I've already wasted $100 on the over-under, and I am not going to be betting any more dollars on the Reds this year.
No, I can't say I blame you. But yes, that's 50,000. BetOnline has those odds, and BetOnline is the best place for you to go get your info on your next bet. Check out betonline.net today and check out the trends in action on your desktop or mobile device. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Reds and Locked On Dodgers your first listen. One live NBA show is not enough because last night they had an amazing event where every single NBA show went live during the draft. You can check out the podcast forms of all of those shows on your favorite NBA channel today because Locked On NBA covers the NBA draft like no other network can on draft night, and you can check out the podcast today. All right, Jeff, we have thoroughly covered the fact that the Reds have been outclassed. They've been outmanned. They've been outgunned. They were just destroyed. So let's look toward the future because the Reds and the Dodgers, like we said, are going in different directions. The Dodgers are looking for an edge. They're looking for that dude who can get them over the hump and make it almost intuitive that they're going to the World Series and that they can win the World Series. But there's a couple of things they need to do first, and it all starts with prospects. The Dodgers don't usually have to worry about such a thing because their front office is amazingly aggressive and knows how to build a team, but they've got some dudes who could be available and probably some dudes who are untouchable. So let's start with first, who are some prospects that the Reds would be enticed by if they offer, say, this dude back here, Luis Castillo? What kind of prospects would the Dodgers be willing to offer?
You said the word untouchable, and I almost never believe in the word untouchable. The Dodgers traded their top two prospects last year for Max Scherzer and Trea Turner. When you have a trade available that's Max Scherzer and Trea Turner, there's no such thing as untouchable. I would trade my mother for that trade last year. When they traded Alex Verdugo for Mookie Betts, I would have traded my dad for Mookie Betts. Sorry, Dad, love you, but go play for the Red Sox now. But when it comes to guys like Castillo and Malley, I don't think those guys quite reached the level of Scherzer and Trea Turner. And so, I'd say for all intents and purposes, Diego Cartaya is untouchable. I don't know that there's anybody even remotely available on this year's trade market that would make the Dodgers even think about that. I think the same is probably pretty true for Bobby Miller. Their pitching prospect who throws 100 miles an hour, has great secondary stuff, looks like he's going to be a dude. He's, a lot of people compare him to Walker Buehler. There's actually not many similarities. He's quite a bit bigger than Buehler and more advanced than Buehler was at this stage of his career. Doesn't mean that he's going to end up better than Buehler, but, so I'd say those two guys are probably pretty untouchable. And then you get into kind of the next tier of prospects where the fact is that, the Dodgers and Keith Law had them ranked the number one farm system this offseason. They were more like in the definitely top 10 everywhere, top 5 most places. And that is because they have a lot of prospect depth. They have a ton of guys, nobody with the huge high ceilings, although Diego Cartaya may end up being one of the top 5 prospects in baseball pretty soon. But overall, it's just a lot of prospect depth. And when you have that many prospects and, you also like to spend money on established big leaguers, The fact is, a lot of these guys exist for the purpose of getting traded to get you what you need at a trade deadline. And so it's hard to say which ones, but they in the 20, was it just last year's draft? In one of the last two drafts, I think it was just last year's draft, they drafted, I think 19 of their 20 picks were pitchers. So they have a ton of minor league pitchers, and there's not going to be room for all of them. And so you've got guys who, Ryan Pepio isn't quite at the same prospect level as Bobby Miller, even though Pepio's made his major league debut and has a crazy good changeup. And I really believe Pepio is going to be really good. He's a guy who might entice a lot of teams. He's one who it's kind of the borderline for me between untouchable and this is the guy we're actually pushing because he's going to bring back the most in return. Pepio could be a guy, a lot of guys, Landon Knack, Maddox Bruns, Andre Jackson, Clayton Beater, they have a lot of pitching prospects who could be enticing to some teams. On the offensive side, you got Andy Pages, who has a ton of power. They actually almost traded him to the Angels the same week that they got Mookie Betts. They had a trade agreed on with the Angels. They were going to send Ross Stripling and Jock Peterson and Andy Pages to the Angels for Luis Rengifo, and I think it might have been Taylor Ward. They never said that name, but and then Artie Moreno got his feelings hurt that the Dodgers were waiting to see how things worked out with their Mookie Betts trade first, and Marino said, "I'm taking my ball and I'm going home." Pages now he's kind of a stud field in the minor leagues, and so he's a guy who, when you've got, you got Mookie Betts, you've got a lot of outfielders. We don't know what they're going to do with Cody Bellinger after this year, and what they do with Andy Pages this trade deadline might kind of give us a little bit of insight into what they're thinking about doing with Cody Bellinger next year. Pages plays some center field. I don't think he's a major league center fielder, but the Dodgers have Chris Taylor, who they can shift over to center field if Pages needs to play a corner outfield spot. But, he's a guy, Miguel Vargas. I think he's probably the future at third base for the Dodgers, but there are questions about whether he can stay at third base defensively. And third base, if he can't, then there's not as much room for him on the Dodgers because, they've tried him at first base in the minor leagues. Well, I don't know if you heard the Dodgers recently signed a first baseman for quite a while. So
it's pretty good.
They do have the DH now. And so Vargas could, but you don't really want to go with the 24-year-old as you're a full-time DH now for the rest of your career. I think they're going to want him to play the field somewhere. And so he's a guy who I could see him starting at third base for the Dodgers later this year. I could also see him getting traded in July. And Vargas is a guy who definitely would entice a lot of teams because he's good enough to hit in the big leagues right now. They're just trying to figure out, can he play defense anywhere?
And Steve, when we look at this here, who's available?
Well, everybody not named Tyler Stevenson, Jonathan India, Hunter Green, and Nick Lodolo and Graham Ashcraft are available. Let's be clear about that. But obviously, Luis Castillo is the Reds' biggest trade chip right now. That's going to be the guy that brings the best return to the minor league system. So when you look at that, you have to think that, the Dodgers may have to actually let go of one of these guys that in normal circumstances you would think might be untouchable in order to get this deal done, because the Dodgers are not going to be the only team calling about Luis Castillo. And I don't know that Tyler Mahle will bring as great a return in prospects to the Reds as Luis Castillo will. So I think that the Reds have to be very careful and very strategic about pulling the trigger on a Luis Castillo trade. They really do need to maximize his value. And it's really just going to boil down to who in Major League Baseball wants La Piedra more.
Well, and Jeff said it right, that the Dodgers are very keen on paying for major league talent, and they're very aggressive when it comes to those numbers and when it comes to those contract years. And I think that Luis Castillo is perfect fit here because I think he's priced himself out of the Reds. Even if the Reds were the type that probably would sign him to some kind of a long-term deal, they're not going to. So it's going to be a situation where he is going to be available. And I think that's why you keep seeing him at the top of like available trade chips so far as pitching goes, because the pitching market itself is going to be kind of thin. Because I was looking at some of the other names on that list, and they're just nowhere near as impressive as Luis Castillo. Though, to your point, it's definitely a separation between Max Scherzer and Luis Castillo. He's not the kind of guy that you just, basically set down a blank checkbook on the Reds' desk and say, "What do you want?"
And the interesting thing about Castillo is, like, I understand where you're coming from, Steve, but Luis Castillo's performance doesn't necessarily warrant that. He's got the lowest strikeout rate of his career this year. And, I think a lot of teams are going to be seeing him as, oh, he's a guy who has good stuff and maybe we could fix him. Not that he's broken, but Luis Castillo, almost without exception, every year has been a guy who's like, you're almost always looking at him like, well, he hasn't quite had as much success as we would have expected with that stuff, and this year, maybe even more than most years, that's the case. He's not even getting the strikeouts, used to just be, oh, he's getting a ton of strikeouts, but he walks too many guys, or he had some bad luck or whatever. This year, he's not even getting the strikeouts. And while I do believe that if he went to the Dodgers magical pitching farm, he would be that guy, I don't know that the Dodgers are going to be willing to pay for him like he's that guy, if that makes sense.
It does. And I do want to just say this about Luis Castillo's numbers. I mean, you're absolutely spot on with the strikeout rate, but everything else, also bear in mind that he has had one of the worst defenses in the history of the Cincinnati Reds lined up behind him. With, the bloated corpse of Mike Moustakas playing third base, random minor league call up playing shortstop when Kyle Farmer is out, random whoever they can stick at whatever position on a daily basis playing everywhere else. It's been bad in Cincinnati. So some of the numbers reflect that. Some of the extended innings and throwing the starting pitchers off their game because they have to throw a 30-pitch inning because the infield missed 3 ground balls. All of those things have added up. But you're absolutely right on the strikeout rates. That is a problem that he needs to correct in order to get his value up. And I'm hopeful that in his next couple of starts, maybe he'll manage to do that before we send him packing for a nice prospect in return.
Yeah, because they have to trade him.
Like, they have to.
It would be ridiculous for them not to trade him. And like you said, other those few names you mentioned, they should be trading everybody. If they can find somebody who wants the worst person in the world, Tommy Pham, they should trade him. They should. And then you guys wouldn't have to pretend to root for Tommy Pham anymore. It's a win-win.
100%. But I'll tell you this, it's very evident. I mean, in the past, the Reds and the Dodgers have been very friendly trade partners. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be again this year. I don't necessarily know exactly what that looks like, but I got a thought about that or two. We will set the stage because we've already set the stage. We will build a trade between the Reds and the Dodgers coming up next. Make sure, though, that you are following us on Twitter. You can follow Steve at @SOffenbaker with 2 Fs. You can follow me at Jeff Carr with 3 Fs. And you can follow Jeff Snider at Snydog with no Fs.
1G,
and of course, you can 1G. And then you can follow both of our shows at Locked On Dodgers and at Locked On Reds. There's no Fs in those either, which makes it easy to spell, I guess. I don't know. Well, I tell you what, we have kind of broken down, what sort of prospects there are in the Dodgers system that the Reds probably aren't going to be able to get. I kind of thought, because I was looking at this the other day, as to some targets that they could have, and Bobby Miller, I kind of figured he was a little bit too high, and Diego Cartaya especially. But I did look at Andy Pages. I really like what he has done and the reports that I read about him in the minor leagues. And the Reds, quite frankly, are pretty thin in the outfield when you talk about what's coming up through the system. We look at some guys who are playing shortstop right now or who are listed as shortstops who are playing elsewhere who could possibly play in the outfield for the Reds once they get to the major leagues. But if we could have one bona fide dude out there, I would like that. And I think that he is a dude that if the Reds were to trade Luis Castillo to the Dodgers, I'd like to see him back in a potential package. So if we include Andy Pages, what else would there be? Is this something where it's like, okay, you got him, now we got to go down the list a little bit? Or do you not have to go down the list that much?
Yeah, there's a reason I'm not a general manager. It's I don't know that I would be very good at making trades. But, Pages, I think, is a good enough prospect that he can highlight a deal. He can be the main guy in a deal that you would refer to it as the Castillo Pages trade 3 years from now, even though there were 3 other guys included. I think, if you look at when the Dodgers got Manny Machado, it was 5 prospects for Manny Machado. When they got Yu Darvish, it was Willie Calhoun and 2 other guys. The Dodgers kind of are built to go with not quantity instead of quality, but maybe a little bit lesser quality because of the quantity they're going with. And a team like the Reds, who I don't know, the Reds have a lot of experience making trades the last 6 or 8 months because they've traded everybody on their team. And
whether it's good experience or not, that's
but so I could see them going with Pages as the highlight and then drop down a little bit. You maybe go with the Andre Jackson, who has some major league experience, has good stuff, potential to be a solid major league starting pitcher, but he's not going to be a number 1 pitcher. But he could fill in a rotation right now. He could fill Castillo's spot in the rotation today. Even though he's not currently in the big leagues, he's got big league experience. He could do that, and go with a few things like that. And then it just comes down to what the Reds are looking for as far as, position wise in their prospects. But I think I could see a package highlighted by Andy Pages, Andre Jackson, and maybe 2 other prospects who are down a little bit on the Dodgers list. I will throw out that I would not be opposed at all to them working out some way that Jonathan Solano's little brother Donovan comes back in the trade, because that right now the Dodgers have Hanser Alberto kind of filling that bench role, the right-handed bat off the bench. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Donovan Solano, the best hitter in the world, would be a better option there.
Jeff's, I think also for the Reds, we've talked about on our show that there is a notable absence of any first baseman in the Reds pipeline from Cincinnati all the way down to Daytona. Basically, there's not a legitimate first base prospect that anybody's really talking about. So that would be a need, I think, to at least bring somebody in to try and fill that hole. And also never underestimate the fact that the Dodgers have the ability to do something that will make the Castellini ownership group very, very happy. And that's write a check for cash. So if you can't find just the right prospect fit for this team, I can guarantee you the Dodgers can write a check big enough that will make old Bob pull the trigger.
Yeah. The Dodgers only have 3 guys in their top 30 prospects who've played any first base at all. Michael Busch was drafted as a first baseman, but then they turned him into a second baseman. And Busch is another one of those guys who in this current trade market might be borderline untouchable. He plays a position that the Dodgers might have a need at soon at second base. And he's just tearing it up in the minor leagues this year. And he hasn't played first base really in the minors at all. They basically said, no, you're not a first base anymore. You're a second baseman. And it's not a transition you see very often, but it's worked for him. Then they got Miguel Vargas, who first base, like I said, is one of the positions they're trying him at because they don't think he can stick at third. And so, maybe Vargas highlights the deal instead of Andy Pages, if you really do want a first baseman. And then they've got Justin Yurchak way down on the list, who isn't going to highlight anything, but could be one of those. He's got some pop as a hitter. He's a decent hitter and could be a guy you take a flyer on as one of the lower level prospects coming back in a trade, if for no other reason than that he plays first base.
So let's say this. I think what I'm getting, what I'm hearing a little bit is let's put this together. Luis Castillo, Donovan Solano for Andy Pages, Ryan Pepio, and Yurchak.
I don't know that I'm going Pages and Pepio. I go Pages, Andre Jackson, and Justin Yurchak. I mean, if you're getting back Solano too, I don't know that. It's hard to see on this market them going with Pages and Pepio in the same trade. I don't know that there's anybody who's going to bring back that package. But maybe you go, I don't know, like Michael Grove, maybe, who's also made his major league debut this year, has really good stuff, has taken a lot of steps forward in the minor leagues the last couple years. But yeah, Pepio, I don't think they do Pages and Pepio.
Okay. Well, that's worth thinking about. I'm interested to see just exactly what's going to materialize, because I have a hard time believing that Nick Kral's not had conversations with the Dodgers about what they could look forward to in this trade season. But that's going to wrap us up here today. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a lot of fun talking about this series, and I'm not going to lie, I'm really glad the Reds don't have to play the Dodgers anymore.
Yeah, and I thought the Dodgers did a good job this week of driving down the trade value on a couple of those starting pitchers that you guys are offering.
Yeah, probably also helping themselves in the process. Yes,
win, baby. Except for you guys, win, lose.
That's been the way it's been all year. That's just the way it's been all year. But I tell you what, we are going to continue to be covering the Reds and Dodgers every single day. Make sure you check out Locked On Dodgers, as Jeff said in the Locked On Now we played earlier. He and Vince are also going to break down this coming up Braves series. Plus, we have got Reds Giants in San Francisco. And speaking of in San Francisco, Steve is going to be in San Francisco. Hopefully, he sees somewhat better baseball by the Reds.
That's right. I'm gonna drop in there for Saturday and Sunday. So anybody, if you're out at the ballpark in San Francisco, come up, say hi. Be happy to talk to you. I'm looking forward to it. And then I'll be in Cincinnati in July. So gonna get a lot of Reds baseball over the next couple months, Jeff.
Hey, with the Reds playing the Giants, we're all Reds fans this weekend.
There you go. And that's going to be a great way to end this. Thanks for making us your first listen. Now go check out Locked On MLB. Sully's got you covered with all things, both past and present baseball, because he's been a baseball fan for a while. That's Locked On MLB, just like Locked On Reds and Locked On Dodgers, free and available on all platforms. We'll talk to each and every one of you on Monday, and Jeff's going to talk to you here in a few minutes.